We live in a world where immediate reaction is almost expected. Someone says something hurtful, someone crosses a line, someone disrespects us, and the instinct is to snap back, fire with fire. We react, and we react quickly, because it feels like that's the way we protect our dignity. That's how we defend ourselves. That's how we prove we're strong. But I want to offer a different way to think about it. What if true strength isn't in the reaction, but in the response? You see, a reaction is emotional. It's automatic. It bypasses thought. It skips reflection. It doesn't ask, what outcome do I want? It simply says, I've been hurt and I need to hurt back. That's not strength. That's survival mode. And survival mode might win you a moment, but it often costs you your values. Now, I understand the impulse. We're human. When someone disrespects us, especially publicly, it feels like they've tried to take something from us, our image, our respect, our voice. And there's something inside of us that screams, take it back now. But here's the truth. If someone can take your dignity with a few careless words or actions, then it was never rooted in something internal. It was dependent on them, not you. That's the trap. When we allow other people to control how we behave, especially in moments of tension, we give them the steering wheel to our character. We let them dictate the tone. And slowly, without even noticing it, we start becoming reactive people. Triggered people, defensive people. That's not leadership. That's insecurity in disguise. Now let's talk about response. Responding is not about letting people walk over you. In fact, it's the opposite. A response is deliberate. It's grounded. It takes into account who you are and what you stand for. It asks the question, what does my reaction say about me? Because at the end of the day, you are not just a product of what happens to you. You are a product of how you choose to deal with it. Here's the real test of character. Can you pause when everything in you wants to attack? Can you take a deep breath when your ego is on fire? Can you stay rooted in your values when your pride is under siege? That's the challenge. And it's not easy. It never will be. But it's necessary if you want to live a life that's not just reactive, but intentional. In leadership, in relationships, in life. There will be moments when people test your patience, your integrity, your boundaries. Some will do it by accident. Others will do it intentionally, but how you respond is entirely up to you. That's where your power lives. You don't have to fight every battle to win the war. In fact, sometimes the greatest victories are silent ones. When you refuse to be pulled into someone else's storm, when you choose calm, when you choose clarity, when you choose self-respect over ego defense. Imagine this. Someone disrespects you in a meeting. Maybe they cut you off. Maybe they mock your idea. Maybe they imply something about your competence. The room goes quiet. Everyone waits for your reaction. This is the moment. You feel it in your chest. Your heart races. Your palms sweat. Your instinct is to snap back, prove them wrong, embarrass them the way they just tried to embarrass you. But what if instead you looked them in the eye, nodded once, and said, noted, then continued with your thought, undeterred, unshaken, calm. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but you know how much strength that takes? More than most people have, and that's exactly why it commands attention. Because when you don't react with emotion, you show people that your confidence isn't paper thin, it's rooted, it's built. And that's what people remember. We've been conditioned to think that power looks loud, that dominance looks like aggression, that respect is earned by force. But the truth is, people follow those who have the strength to choose their response, not the ones who need to prove it every time they're challenged. The loudest person in the room often isn't the strongest, the most grounded one is. There's an old saying, he who angers you conquers you. It's true. When you let someone's disrespect dictate your emotional state, they've won more than just a moment. They've taken space in your mind. But when you choose to respond instead of react, you reclaim that space. You keep your peace. You preserve your dignity. And let's be clear, responding doesn't mean you don't address the issue. It means you do it on your terms. When you're ready, with intention, with clarity, maybe in private, maybe after a pause, maybe after asking yourself, What outcome do I want from this conversation? Because when you respond from that place, you not only stand up for yourself, you elevate the entire situation. That's what leadership looks like. Not just in titles, but in behavior, in how you carry yourself when tested, in how you model what respect looks like even when others forget. So the next time someone disrespects you, remember this. You don't need to match their energy. You don't need to play their game. You don't need to prove anything to them. Your value doesn't shrink just because they failed to see it. Instead, pause. Choose to respond, not to react. Because your power isn't in how loudly you speak back. It's in how deeply you remain yourself. When someone disrespects you, it stings. It cuts deeper than most people realize. It's not just about what was said or done. It's about what it implied, that somehow you're less important, less intelligent, less worthy. And the natural impulse is to focus all your energy on them, on what they did, on how wrong they were, on how they crossed the line. But in leadership and in life, if we want to grow, we have to look beyond the surface. Because people rarely act out of malice alone. Their behavior, no matter how disrespectful, often stems from something deeper. And if we can take a step back and ask not just what did they do, but why did they do it, we can shift from reaction to understanding. Now, this is not about excusing bad behavior. It's not about pretending disrespect is acceptable. It's about perspective. It's about wisdom. Because when you understand what drives people, you become harder to shake and more powerful in how you show up. Think about it. When a colleague talks over you in a meeting, what's really going on? Maybe it's arrogance, maybe. But maybe it's insecurity, maybe it's fear. Maybe they're in survival mode, trying to protect their place at the table. That doesn't make it okay, but it helps you see that their behavior is not necessarily about you. It's about them. And that's important. Because when we assume that every act of disrespect is personal, we take on a weight that was never meant for us. We carry baggage that belongs to someone else. Their fears, their trauma, their frustrations, their past, their pain, all of it gets projected. And if we're not careful, we absorb it, we mirror it, we become it. But when we understand the why, we create space between the action and our response, space to choose a better way, space to lead. One of the most powerful questions we can ask ourselves in the face of disrespect is, what is this person really fighting? Because most of the time, it's not you. It's something inside of them, something unresolved, something unhealed. People project what they haven't processed. They lash out, not because you deserve it, but because they don't know where else to put their pain. And the truth is, every one of us has been that person at some point. We've all had moments where we let fear or stress or pressure get the best of us. We've all said things we didn't mean, acted in ways we're not proud of, failed to show up as our best selves. Understanding this doesn't make us weak. It makes us human. And when you approach people through that lens, you stop needing to win every interaction. You stop needing to dominate. You stop needing to clap back just to feel in control. Instead, you begin to lead, not just with your mind, but with your heart. Let me tell you a story. There was a young manager who was disrespected by a senior executive during a team presentation. She was cut off mid-sentence, dismissed publicly, and later told her work was underwhelming. The whole team witnessed it. And she was humiliated, crushed, really. The easy thing would have been to retaliate, to go to HR, to gossip, to complain, and nobody would have blamed her. But she didn't. Instead, she took a pause, and she did something remarkable. She scheduled a one-on-one with the executive, not to confront him in anger, but to ask him a simple question. Is everything okay? He was surprised. He didn't expect that. And after a moment of silence, he broke down. He admitted he was going through a painful divorce, that he hadn't slept in weeks, that he'd been drinking too much, that he felt like his whole life was falling apart, and he didn't know how to hold it together anymore. Now, none of that made his behavior acceptable. but it made it make sense. And that small act of curiosity, that question, that willingness to understand, changed their entire dynamic. It restored trust. It brought humanity back into the conversation. Understanding doesn't require you to stay in toxic situations. It doesn't mean you tolerate ongoing disrespect, but it does allow you to lead with empathy and protect your own peace in the process. Because once you understand that someone else's behavior is a reflection of them, you stop letting it define you. You get to say, I see what this is, and I choose not to carry it. This is the heart of mature leadership, to not only manage behavior, but to see beyond it, to recognize that every person is fighting invisible battles, and to meet those battles, not with judgment, but with wisdom. It's not about being the bigger person just for the sake of moral superiority. It's about being the stronger person, the clearer person, the one who can see the storm and still choose stillness. The world doesn't need more people who react. It needs more people who reflect, who pause, who ask better questions, who seek to understand. Because only then can we build environments, teams, relationships, cultures where people feel seen, where they can grow, where healing can actually happen. So the next time you're disrespected, try this. Instead of jumping to conclusions, take a step back and ask yourself, what's really going on here? It won't always be obvious. It won't always be simple. But that one question has the power to transform not only how you experience conflict, but how others experience you. And that's how change begins. Not when we shout louder, but when we understand deeper. There's a difference between standing up for yourself and showing off. There's a difference between setting a boundary and throwing a wall. And there's a big difference between defending your ego and protecting your values. When someone disrespects you, the impulse is often to push back hard, to prove you're not the one to be messed with, to raise your voice, puff up your chest, and remind them, loudly, who they're dealing with. That's ego talking. And it's seductive. It feels like strength. It feels like control. But it's not. It's insecurity with a microphone. True strength doesn't come from how loudly you can speak. It comes from how clearly you can stand. Because the goal isn't to dominate. The goal is to stay aligned with who you are, even when someone else forgets who they are. Boundaries are not weapons. They're not about getting even. They're not about punishing. Boundaries are simply the lines we draw to protect what matters most: our time, our energy, our peace, and our integrity. They say, this is how I expect to be treated. This is what I will and will not accept. Not because I'm better than you, but because I respect myself. And that's the difference. Ego demands attention. Boundaries demand respect. And the way we assert them determines which one people see. We often mistake silence for weakness and loudness for power, but silence can be a strategy. And power is in presence, it's in clarity, it's in the ability to say something without yelling it. It's the calm in your voice when someone expects you to explode. It's the steady gaze when they try to provoke you. It's the choice to speak only when you have something worth saying, not just something to prove. When someone disrespects you, they're often testing your edges. They're testing how far they can go. Whether it's intentional or unconscious, they're trying to locate your boundaries. And if you don't know where your own line is, you'll either let them cross it, or you'll react too aggressively trying to find it in the moment. That's when people either get walked on or blow up. Neither of those outcomes is leadership. So you have to do the work before the moment comes. You have to define your boundaries clearly internally. What kind of behavior are you willing to tolerate? How do you want to be treated? What kind of energy do you want to allow in your life? And when someone crosses the line, because someone will, you won't be caught off guard. You'll know what to say, how to say it, and when to walk away if needed. That's not ego. That's discipline. There's a myth that kindness means being passive, that to be gracious, you must be endlessly forgiving, endlessly accommodating. That's not kindness. That's self-abandonment. Kindness includes self-respect. And sometimes the most kind, most grounded thing you can do is to look someone in the eye and say, no, that doesn't work for me. No apology, no justification. It's just truth, deliver it calmly. Ego seeks validation. It wants to win the argument. It wants to feel superior. But boundaries aren't about winning. They're about alignment. They're about creating an environment around you and within you where respect can exist, where you don't have to fight to be seen, where people know where you stand, not because you shouted it, but because you lived it. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you don't need to be loud to be clear, that you don't have to match someone's disrespect to show them you're serious. You simply have to be consistent. You have to be rooted, because when your boundaries are built from your values, they don't change with your mood. They don't rise and fall based on who you're talking to. They're steady, they're principled, they're not performative. And that's why people eventually trust them, even if they don't like them at first. Sometimes setting a boundary means walking away from a conversation. Sometimes it means not answering the message. Sometimes it means telling someone, I'm not willing to continue this if we can't speak respectfully. That might feel uncomfortable, it might feel confrontational, but here's the truth. Growth and comfort rarely live in the same space, right? And if your goal is to build a life, a career, a team, a relationship grounded in respect, you have to be willing to choose short-term discomfort for long-term integrity. You have to be willing to let people be upset, to let them misunderstand you, to let them walk away if that's the cost of staying true to who you are. That's not weakness, that's maturity. You don't owe anyone access to you just because they demand it. You don't owe anyone kindness if they use it as a weapon. And you don't owe anyone your peace just to avoid awkwardness. You owe yourself alignment. You owe yourself clarity. You owe yourself the freedom to live in a way that reflects your deepest values, not your loudest fears. So when someone disrespects you, pause. Check in with yourself. Ask, is this about them or is this about me? If it's about them, don't let your ego write the script. Let your integrity lead instead. Then set the boundary clearly, calmly, consistently. Because boundaries are not the enemy of connection. They are the foundation of healthy connection. They create safety. They build trust. They send a message, not just to others, but to yourself, that your values are worth protecting. In a world that often confuses noise for leadership, your steadiness will stand out. And in a moment where someone tries to pull you into chaos, your boundary will speak louder than any raised voice ever could. Not because you shouted, but because you stood. There's something about being wrong that lingers. When someone disrespects you, it doesn't always end in the moment. The words might have been said in passing, but they echo. The moment might be over, but it replays over and over in your mind, in your body. It's like a knot that refuses to untangle. And that's where grudges are born. You know, grudges don't need fuel, they feed themselves. They feed on silence, on overthinking, on the conversations we never had. They convince us that holding on is how we protect ourselves, that remembering the offense is how we stay strong, that staying hurt is somehow safer than healing. But what if it's not? What if holding the grudge keeps you stuck in the very moment you're trying to move on from? We don't talk about grace enough. Not real grace, not the kind that requires strength, not the kind that requires humility, not the kind that allows you to let go, not because the other person deserves it, but because you. Grace isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the understanding that pain is a teacher, not a home. It's the decision to move forward without dragging the past behind you like a shadow. Grace says, I will remember what happened, but I will not let it define how I show up today. You see, when you lead with grace, you reclaim power. You choose who you are, not in spite of the offense, but because of it. You show that your character doesn't shift based on how others treat you. You remain steady, you remain true. That doesn't mean you pretend nothing happened. That doesn't mean you let people walk over you. Grace isn't about denial, it's about direction. It means you acknowledge the pain, but you don't set up camp there. You acknowledge the disrespect, but you don't mirror it. You learn from it, and then bit by bit, you release the emotional debt it tried to leave with you. Because the truth is, a grudge is debt. It's something you carry that doesn't belong to you. It costs you time, energy, and presence. It interrupts your peace. It bleeds into relationships that had nothing to do with the original offense. And slowly, it rewrites the way you see the world, more guarded, more bitter, more closed off. Then we think that by holding on to the pain, we're holding the other person accountable. But in most cases, they've moved on. They're not thinking about what they said. They're not losing sleep. You are. So in the end, the grudge punishes you more than them. That's why grace is the better choice. Not because it lets them off the hook, but because it lets you off the hook. It releases you from the emotional grip of the moment. It allows you to move from reaction to responsibility. To say, I didn't deserve that, but I also don't deserve to be chained to it forever. And when you lead with grace, something interesting happens. People notice. They feel the difference. Grace has a presence to it. It's quiet but powerful. It doesn't demand the room, but it shifts the energy in it. When you choose not to retaliate, when you choose not to gossip, when you choose not to carry bitterness like a badge, you show people what leadership really looks like. Because anyone can fight fire with, but not everyone can stay calm while others burn bridges. That's rare. And rare is remembered. There will be people who don't understand this, who see grace as passivity, who think you should hit back harder, be tougher, be louder. But those voices often come from people still carrying their own grudges. People who haven't yet learned that grace is not about the other person's behavior, it's about your freedom. You get to decide what kind of leader you are, what kind of friend, what kind of partner. What kind of human? And those decisions are made in the quiet moments when no one's watching, when your pride is wounded, when your voice shakes. That's where character is built, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. Grace doesn't mean you forget. It means you choose not to be consumed. It means you choose clarity over chaos, growth over grudges, peace over performance. And this doesn't happen all at once. Grace is a practice. Sometimes daily, sometimes moment by moment. But the more you choose it, the lighter you become. The less you feel the need to prove, the less you carry. And in that lightness, you create space for something far more powerful: growth. Because here's the hidden gift inside every moment of disrespect. It gives you the opportunity to define who you are. Not in reaction, but in intention. You get to decide whether you will echo their behavior or elevate the moment. So when someone disrespects you and that knot starts forming in your chest, pause, feel it, name it. Then ask yourself, what outcome do I really want here? Is it revenge or is it resolution? Is it control or is it clarity? Grace will always point you toward clarity, toward wholeness, toward the version of you that isn't held hostage by someone else's immaturity. And that's what leadership is. It's not about controlling others, it's about leading yourself, especially when it's hardest. Grace is not about who's right, it's about doing what's right for your future. So no, you don't have to forget what they said. You don't have to erase the moment. But you can choose not to live in it. You can choose not to hold that grudge one more day. You can choose to lead with grace, not grudge. Because letting go is not giving up. It's rising above. In moments of disrespect, we often retreat inward. It's natural. We feel vulnerable, exposed. And so the instinct is to build walls, to protect ourselves. We think if we shield ourselves from others, if we become unapproachable or distant, then we won't have to experience the hurt again. We think the best defense is isolation. But here's the truth. That wall, that defense, it doesn't protect you. It only separates you. It creates distance between you and the very people who could help you grow. It distances you from the relationships that could bring you the support, the insight, and the community you need to rise above any moment of disrespect. Because we don't heal in isolation. We heal in connection. And the stronger your connections are, the stronger you will be when the world tries to knock you down. It's easy to let disrespect push you away from others, to withdraw, to go into survival mode. But when you isolate, you are giving in to the very thing that is trying to take your power away. you're letting the disrespect win. You're building walls, and in doing so, you're making it harder for people who care about you to help you, to support you, and to remind you of your worth. What you need in those moments is not more distance. What you need is to build your inner circle. The people who will show up for you when the world tries to pull you down. The people who will hold you accountable to your best self, even when you're tempted to shrink back in shame. The people who will remind you that your value is not determined by how others treat you, but by the strength and integrity with which you show up every day. Building your inner circle is not about finding people who will always agree with you or people who will never challenge you. It's about finding people who will see you for who you truly are. People who will help you get back to center when you've lost your way. People who will remind you of your vision when the small moments of disrespect start to cloud your perspective. There is power in the people you surround yourself with. Power in those who choose to see the best in you, even when you can't see it yourself. Power in those who will hold space for your emotions and help you move through them with wisdom. Power in those who will stand beside you, not just in your moments of glory, but in your moments of pain. This is not a call to gather people around you just to stroke your ego or validate your feelings. And this is a call to build relationships with people who will challenge you, push you, and remind you of your purpose. People who won't just tell you what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. In the face of disrespect, you need people who will not let you stay in bitterness. You need people who will remind you that you are stronger than the words that were spoken, that you are wiser than the situation that tried to pull you down, that you are capable of moving through it with grace and integrity. It's easy to get lost in our own thoughts, to replay the situation over and over, to get caught up in how wrong it was and how hurt we are. But it's in these moments when we're feeling the most vulnerable that we need the voices of those who will remind us of our higher purpose. We need people who will help us stay focused on what matters most, not on the offense we're holding on to. Building your inner circle isn't just about finding people who make you feel good in the moment. It's about finding people who bring out the best in you, people who know your values, your strengths, and your weaknesses, and who will always, no matter what, have your back. We can't navigate this world alone. We can't lead in isolation. True leadership, the kind that makes a lasting impact, is built on the relationships we cultivate. It's built on the trust we create with others and the way we show up for them, even when the world is telling us to protect ourselves. When we choose connection over defense, we open ourselves to possibilities we never imagined. Here's the thing. When you have the right people around you, when you build that inner circle, the moments of disrespect become less about what others are doing to you and more about how you can rise above it. You don't need to react. You don't need to prove a point. You don't need to fight every battle because you know you have a support system, a community that will help you rise through it. They will remind you that you are more than the disrespect you've encountered. You are bigger than the moment. When we try to go it alone, when we try to fight every battle by ourselves, we often burn out. We get tired. We feel small. But when we surround ourselves with the right people, we grow. We grow in our resilience. We grow in our wisdom. We grow in our ability to lead with compassion, not just power. It's also important to note that your inner circle isn't a static group. It's fluid. People come and go. Some will stay for a season, others for a lifetime. The key is to stay open to new connections while remaining rooted in your values. Surround yourself with people who align with your vision for the world, for your work, and for your life. This doesn't mean avoiding difficult conversations. It doesn't mean surrounding yourself only with yes people. It means finding people who will tell you the truth even when it's uncomfortable. It means finding people who will hold you accountable to the best version of yourself, people who will push you to grow, to challenge your assumptions, and to remain committed to your purpose even when things are hard. When you build your inner circle, you are building a foundation for your life, a foundation that is grounded in mutual respect, shared values, and authentic connection. A foundation that will hold you steady when everything else feels uncertain. So the next time you face disrespect, remember this. You don't need to isolate yourself. You don't need to build defenses. You need to surround yourself with people who will remind you of who you are and who you can become. You need to build your inner circle. Because it's not the walls you build around yourself that will keep you safe. It's the relationships you cultivate that will help you thrive.